Well, hello, everyone. I am unbelievably ecstatic. This woman has gone through mountains. She has trudged through mud of life, everything you can think of. She has gone through it and she has succeeded. She has won. She is now helping other women go through exactly what she went through. And I would like for you to welcome my guest this evening. Her pen name is Michelle, and her given name is Adrian Greene. Please welcome Adrian Greene, the author of Stab to Life. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here tonight.
I'm excited.
Uh-oh.
If you can just share where you come from, uh, tell us everything you want us to know about you. Now, I want to say she is the most adorable, petite little lady you'd ever want to imagine.
Oh
But
my
this is a horrific story that has triumphed, and I am going to give her the floor and allow her to just share with us everything you need to know.
God. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. My name is Adrian, as you mentioned. I grew up in Carson, California, two wonderful parents. Um, I am currently an employee of LA County. I have worked for Los Angeles County for 34, it'll be 34 years in December. I absolutely love my job. It has helped me. This helped me pay my bills. It has allowed me to do a lot and take care of my children, which is was very important to me. As I mentioned, that my two household family, I never did see domestic violence growing up, but which is typical for most women that have find themselves in domestic violence relationships, is they witness violence in the home. I, on the other hand, had not seen anything like that, but I did come from a lot of insecurities and low self-esteem and things like that, which I think contributed to me picking the type of men that I had in my life. As I said, I grew up in Carson, which is a wonderful place to grow up in. Anybody that's from Carson knows, like, we're forever family. If you're from Carson, we just have a connection that's out of this world. So I loved growing up in Carson. Went to Banning High School. As I said, I grew up in a very decent, normal two-family home, and I found myself in these relationships, I believe, because of my low self-esteem and insecurities, and because I had experienced some things in my life of I had some body image issues for sure, where I went from a chubby stage to a smaller stage, and so that can be difficult for a young girl. So but and then of course some unwanted touching that contributed to just picking the wrong type of people to be in my life. So, but I'm glad today that I'm able to use my story, and the things that I have gone through to assist women that also find themselves in these situations, because you tend to start feeling like you're the only one that's going through it. And me being transparent about everything that I've gone through, I think has been helpful for women. You still there?
I am here. I'm trying to prevent us from having this
The little
little
delays.
triple page.
Oh,
So
oh, now I can't hear you.
it's okay. We're gonna work it out. We got some
Okay.
fun with what's happening. So what
Yeah.
I ended up doing was just making sure that I took off headphones, put on the headphones so that we wouldn't have that double. But I still
Yeah.
seem to hear it. Hello, Chef
Yeah.
Disaster, Old Head Deuce. How are you, gentlemen? Um, you mentioned something about being raised in a dual family household.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you see a lot of women right now today as a part of your job. How many of those women are raised in single family households? And is this just a misnomer that a lot of women who go through this are looking for a father figure, or they're having some type of issue because they didn't have one parent or the other? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I definitely can say that the women that I have served, the majority of them do come from one household families. Sometimes there is some drug abuse in the homes. Sometimes there is, like I said, there's abuse there. And typically children mimic what they see, whether it's right or wrong. You start to believe that, okay, this is the norm. So you tend to mimic what you see, whether you become the abuser or the abused. So, yeah, it is definitely, I do see that to be a common factor where the women that I serve do come from one household families. Either fathers in jail or just not in the home.
And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about the work that you're doing right now. But before we get into the work that we're doing right now, I want you to walk us through your encounter. Now, it is no secret that Montel Williams hailed your daughter as a hero on his show. I want you to walk us through the incident that day, and I want you to share with us what prompted you to write Stabbed to Life.
Even at the Montel Williams show, the Board of Supervisors from Los Angeles County, as well as the mayor in the city that I live in here in Lancaster, California, also honored her because at that time, that was the biggest domestic violence case that had ever occurred in the Antelope Valley. So they did recognize her because she actually, when he began to stab me, she was the first person that I screamed for. And I yelled at the top of my lungs, Alanya, help me. And she came to my aid and literally shielded me while he was stabbing me. And had she not been there and I had been there alone, there's no way I would be here today. So this is why they took the time to honor her for that heroic act that she did. And it was definitely saved my life.
That's terrible. How old was your daughter at that time?
At that time, she was 15, 14 or 15 years old.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
She
And
was a
her and
baby.
my son actually were there at the time that this all occurred. And what was weird about it is the day at that time they were out of school.
Mhm.
And my dad had this habit, and you know my dad, Big John.
Big
My dad had
John.
yes, my dad had a habit of every morning calling to check on the kids. And just so happened he called that morning and he says, Papa, we have to get out of the house. The police are here. Khalid just stabbed mom. I'm sorry. Yeah, my abuser stabbed me. And I'm sorry, I mentioned his name really quickly, but uh, they had them to get out of the house. So, of course, my father was in a panic, let my mother know what was going on. And it was probably unbelievable for them. And they're in Carson, and I'm all the way here in the Antelope Valley. So I'm sure it was very difficult. They had to, my mom jumped on the freeway, one of her sisters and her came up, and they had to airlift me to Holy Cross, a medical center right there in the valley, right at San Fernando Valley. And they got there in record time to be there for me. But that was the initial them knowing what had occurred, from me being 100, it's at least 100 miles from the Antelope Valley, well, maybe 80 miles from the Antelope Valley to Carson. So they had to get up there and try to assist, to be there for me. So yeah.
Wow. So you're at home. This is your husband or your boyfriend.
No,
Tell us how you guys met. How did we get there that day?
okay. So the way I met him, and it's really odd because he was even arrogant when I first met him, which is why I do the work that I do. I want women to understand the red flags. They're there early on, and we either dismiss them or make light of them, minimize them because here's this 6'8" guy, handsome, green hazel eyes, just adorable. And this is what I saw in the gym, is where I met him right here in Lancaster. And I happened to go to the gym that particular day, and he was on the treadmill. And he was kind of giving them a hard time at the gym because the gym had a thing where you could only stay on the treadmill for 20 minutes at a time, because at that time it was really busy. So to give everybody opportunity, they limited it to 20 minutes. Well, he was going to go past that 20 minutes. And I noticed there was some commotion over at the treadmill where they were trying to get him to get off, and he was causing a big scene and a big commotion. But I sat there on the some of the weight machines, and he happened to walk by, and he stopped and he saw me, and we kind of made eye contact. And right at that moment, he told me, he said, you're doing that machine wrong. And I was like, oh, wow, and he took the time to show me the correct way to do it. But even then, he made an insulting comment that I kind of overlooked, and I attribute that because he was fine. He looked good. He said to me, "You probably need to reduce on your weight a little bit before you start lifting weights, because you need to get some weight down." And I was real sensitive about my weight, so it hurt my feelings that he said it. But those green eyes just made me overlook it. And one thing led to another. Every day at that point, I used to only go to the gym 3 times a week, and I was going every day because I wanted us to see one another. And after a while, we started seeing he was more interested, invited me to his home, and from there on, we were just we began this relationship. And he was Muslim. I thought it was kind of attractive that he seemed very, very strict in his religion. He took the time to pray 5 days a week. I mean, I'm sorry, 5 times a day. And that was so different from anything I had ever been involved in. So I thought, because of the religious aspect, that maybe he was going to be a decent man for me and my children. And he was not at all a decent man for my children. He began to use drugs. This is, after some time, I noticed that he had a drug issue. And typical of most women, I think the statistics are 7 to 8 times before you actually leave. I became an enabler. I kept thinking I could fix the situation. I could get him in rehab and get him to get off drugs and all these different things. And he wouldn't. He began to become very physical abusive. I'll never forget the very first time he got physically abusive was he called me out of my name. He called me a bitch. And then I said, just out of response, I said, your mama's a bitch. And I probably shouldn't have said that, but that's the first time he hit me. And he hit me so hard that it literally, I was out cold. And even after that, I forgave and continued the relationship. So that was the initial hit. And I think prior to that, there might have been like a little push or shove, or maybe some arguing that I overlooked. Oh, well, he just pushed me, or he just called me out of my name. But that time when he hit me, that was the first time I realized, oh my God, I'm with an abusive man. And then got to the point where I moved. He told me that he'd probably get off drugs if we could move out of state. And I took him up on that. I thought that, okay, maybe if we do move out of state, maybe he'll change. Like, there's no drug dealers out of state. But I fell for that and went out there, uprooted my children, quit my job of so many years, took a leave of absence, if you will, and went out there to try to make that situation work. And I wasn't there 2 weeks before he already showed signs that he was back on the drugs. And I think a combination of me being embarrassed, me still, caring deeply for him, thinking I could fix it. Maybe it was something I could do just a little different. He would change, and it just got progressively worse. Yeah.
This is really somewhat of the typical stories that we hear a lot of times. I myself have had domestic violence situation in my life. I always tell everybody, anyone who's followed this channel for a while knows everything that I've been through. And I remember how the isolation started. Now, you mentioned that he was not the children's dad. How did he treat their children? And do you have any male children? Okay. So you do have male children, and how did he treat them?
He was very strict with them. At the time, uh, I thought that it was good for them to have this structure and this discipline. He made them, they had to mop the floor every single night after washing dishes, put the chairs on the table. The house had to stay clean. They had to take off their shoes when they entered the home, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was extremely strict. He greeted them as Muslims greet one another, Assalamu alaikum, and he insisted that they greet him that way. And to keep peace for my sake, I think they did it and continue to do that so that I wouldn't get into it with him, because he would definitely tell me, hey, your kids need to make sure that they greet me the proper way and things like that. And I just, when you're in it, it doesn't seem like it's that bad. But when I look at it today, I made some very unhealthy decisions that affected my children by, number one, staying, and number two, them specifically asking me not to allow him back. And instead, I let him continue coming back, staying in the home when they knew he wasn't healthy for me and that he was abusing me. And another thing that I did, which is act- absolutely horrible, but I try to be transparent because I know some people can relate to that, is I would tell my children when they would go to my mom's house, maybe for the weekend, I would get right in their face and let them know, you don't repeat anything that goes on in this house. And what a terrible way for children to grow up, is to have to keep an ugly secret like their mom is being abused. But they did that, and they did it for a while. And then one day, out of nowhere, my mom called me and she said, "Look," and I attribute this to the fact that my kids finally told them some of the stuff that was going on. And my mom said, "Look, if you don't get my grandkids out of that mess, I'm calling children's services on you." And the way she said it, because my mother isn't one to use a lot of profanity, but the way she said it that day, I knew she meant business. So I told him that night, I said, "You got to go. This is not going to work." Now, keep in mind, there was a lot of things prior to what I'm about to share with you right now, but it gets kind of lengthy. But I told him, I said, "You have got to go. I can't lose my children." And he says, "I'm not going nowhere." And so that morning I got up and I said, "Remember what we talked about last night?" I said, "You have to get out of here. You have to go. You got to go today." He said, "I'm not going no MF and where." He cussed me out and everything. So when he came downstairs to bring his plate, because I had brought him breakfast upstairs in his room as I normally do, that was my normal routine. He had this thing where he had to have 3 eggs, 3 sausage, 3 pancakes, 3 of everything. Everything was a 3. And that in itself was a red flag, some weird, crazy stuff like that. Everything was in threes. Um, and I conformed to it. And that, like I said, that morning I had to, I pretended, because keep in mind, this was a man, and I don't know if I shared this, but he had been in prison before. He already had 2 strikes. And what he did is he constantly reminded me, hey, look, I got these 2 strikes. And if I'm going to go back to prison, it's probably going to be for 25 to life anyway, regardless of what I do, whether it's a murder or whether it's something small. So he constantly told me that. So I always had the back of my head that he would try to kill me. And because he had this obsession with guns, although he was a felon, he had ways of getting firearms. I mean, like huge firearms, AKs, every kind of weapon you could think. It was there in that house. And I feel horrible about that, because my children were there. It was unsafe for my children. Anyway, he finally, I pretended as though I was calling 911 to see if that would kind of like get him not to do anything. But he grabbed me in my throat and he began to choke me till I couldn't breathe. And at that point, I just dialed it for real. And he heard the lady say, 911, what's your emergency? And at that moment, I thought that he was just punching me in my side, but he was actually stabbing me, because in my peripheral vision, I could see the blood going onto the refrigerator. And he just began to stab me. And that's at that point when I screamed for my daughter to come and help me. And she came to my rescue. And right then and there, because I knew he had the firearms in the home, I ran out to the yard.
Wait a minute. You're bleeding
I'm bleeding.
and you're running out to the yard.
I ran out behind him because he had a utility vehicle, like a truck that had a toolbox on the back. And in that toolbox, he always had a gun. And my first thought, even with me bleeding out and literally could not catch my breath because he had punctured both of my lungs, hit my carotid artery. stabbed me through my hand because I was trying to block my face, and the knife went through my hand out the other side. I was just bleeding profusely, and I stumbled to the grass out in the front, and I just screamed to the top of my lungs. And my neighbor across the street, he was mowing his lawn, so I screamed loud enough where he heard, and he called 911. And my daughter was still on the phone with 911 because remember he thought I hung
Yes.
the phone up with, yeah. So she stayed on the phone with them, and yeah, they had to airlift me to Holy Cross out there and try to save my life. So
So you were stabbed a total of 18 times
18 times, yes.
and lived
Hmm.
and lived.
And
Look at
live. Yes,
look
God is
at
good.
God.
Yes, He is, and that is one of the reasons I contribute doing the work that I do now, is because I feel like that's what I was left here for. And as ugly and as embarrassing as my story is, I know that it helps someone that feels like maybe they're alone, or
Take your time. Take your time.
mhm.
Take your time. Take
I
your
just
time.
want people to know that there's hope for you to get out of these relationships. You cannot fix an individual, whether they're on drugs or whatever the situation is. We have to recognize these red flags early on, and get out of that situation before these things happen. So that is my goal. I've worked with an agency called Two Lifestyles Women Empowerment Program here in the Antelope Valley. I've taken a break right now, so I'm not working with them right now. But I facilitated DV classes, anger management classes, parenting classes for those women, so that they're able to help to get their children back. Because a lot of times, and I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, your children can be detained by DCFS.
I wanted you to talk about that.
Yes, they can be detained by DCFS if you have them in an unsafe environment. And the way the social workers look at it is like, well, hey, if you can't take care of yourself, clearly you cannot take care of your children. So that is one of the things that, I'm when I'm doing these classes, I keep it real. I keep it 100. I let them know the ugly choices that I made that resulted in this, so that they know that it can actually get this bad. So I use my story as a way of helping, and I love it. I actually absolutely love being able to go and talk to women and being able to hopefully change their mind on how they look at things. But even with that, even with sharing my story and telling them all the different signs to look for in the cycle of abuse, women go back even after their kids have been taken.
Now, Mona Lachey said a very good statement here. She said it's an incredible book, Stab to Life. Couldn't put it down. I am with her. I mean, it is really, it's like 300 and change as far as the pages are concerned. Like it's
Yeah.
very, but you can basically read this book in a night. You really could. It is that good. You can keep, you'll just turn and turn. Tell us about the book. I want you to tell us what
Okay.
prompted it. When did you get the strength and the courage to do this?
Yeah, I'm gonna be real honest. I must have written the book 5 times. And every time in the beginning, I was kind of sugarcoating it, kind of, not being completely honest, not laying everything out there. And then one day I noticed when I was speaking at a group, uh, and I was sharing some of the real ugly parts of the story, that's when everybody's hands rose. And oh my God, I can relate to that. Yes, that's what I've gone through. So I knew at that point I had to keep it really, really real in the book. And it is some parts that's really ugly and embarrassing and sad. And the fact that I neglected my children, because one of the things DCFS says they charged me with was failure to protect, child endangerment, and I forget what the other charge was. But in the beginning, I was like, no, I'm a good parent. I mean, I'm a victim here. But I did neglect my children. I did put this man before my children. And as hard as that was for me to admit, but I was in a sick place. I was in a very unhealthy position. And if anybody knows what the Stockholm syndrome is, and you ever get an opportunity to read about that, that's what happens. You begin to protect your abuser. You begin to overlook some of the things that is really happening. The reality is not there. So that's why I took the time and wrote this book, and I wanted to keep it right now. Me and my cousin who helped me who published the book, we are going to be working on a workbook to go along with the book so that more people can use this in their DV classes to help women recognize the red flags, to help them recognize the cycle of abuse, and hopefully get out before situations get as bad as they do. But like I said, I wrote the book like 4 or 5 times. And finally, my mentor, Latoya Conway Hampton, and my cousin just continued to push me. You can do it, Adrian. You can do it. And it was hard. I mean, it was nights I would stop and just be in tears because I was reflecting on it. I had journals that went back to 1997 that were very helpful in being able to be um, keep everything in chronological order and to keep it real. Because and even reading back over the journals was like scary. It's like, oh my God, my thinking was so horrible at that time, but it was very necessary, and I'm so glad I did it. I have no regrets at all. You know, some people, I've been asked to go to churches sometime and talk about the book, and I know it's some stuff in there that's like, ugh, not real churchy, if you will, but
I'm
I
going to
think it
stop
was
you right there
necessary.
because where churches are concerned, there are more women who go to church and get beat upside the head. I was one of those women.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
ministered in church, and we had a rule at our church that if you had anything going on, you could
Hmm.
not minister. So if they found out that you were having marital issues at your household or anything going on, or you were considering a divorce, you could not minister. And for me as a vocalist, um, that was the thing that gave me any hope, was being able to sing, was being able to minister, because as I ministered, it healed me as well. And so I didn't want to tell anybody that that's what I was going through because I feared that they would definitely stop me from being able to minister. And so the church is guilty. Okay. The church is very guilty because you'll find a lot of women in the church that will say things to you like, well, just hold on to God's hand. Just pray. It's going to be okay. Don't worry. And the truth of the matter is you will be laid up in the stool messing with some of the stuff those women tell you to do. Now, I want to talk to you about, if you could, maybe read a portion, whatever you feel good, maybe maybe a paragraph, so that folks can hear something, because you guys can get this book for
Hmm.
yourself, for a
Yes.
loved one, for a friend, neighbor, somebody. You don't even have to tell them that you know what's going on, but you can just bless them with this. This is the month for domestic violence. It's actually dedicated for domestic violence.
Hmm.
And there are more people right now that are suffering from domestic violence, especially while this pandemic is going on. It is on the rise. And so this is a very timely season for us to speak up on this and make it known. And we need to help it to stop. How about that? So I'm going to just give you the opportunity, give you the moment here. I'm going to take my face away and give you yours. Let me get like y'all gonna be talking about me because y'all know I don't know how to use this stuff, but I'm learning. Praise be to God. There.
Well, if I could too, piggyback off of what you said about the pandemic, with so many people at home, this has definitely caused people to be at home with their abusers. Some people find work, as I did, as that break away from that abusive situation, because it was like walking on eggshells, especially because he had a drug problem. I didn't know from one day to the next what to expect. So it was very difficult. I can imagine what some of these women are going through, that are now stuck at home with their abusive partners because because of this pandemic. Everybody is on quarantine. We're in the house, and I couldn't even imagine being at home with him all day, knowing the stuff that was going on. So my heart goes out to those who find themselves in that situation. And I know you said you would have the National Domestic Violence Hotline number available. Please, ladies, if you find yourself in a situation, definitely have a safety plan, but also utilize those numbers and resources to get yourself help and you and your children safe.
And may I say
So
this, there are
mhm.
also men who
Oh
are
yeah,
being beat up.
yes,
And
yes. I mean,
that is something that is understated. There are a
mhm.
lot of women that are physically abusive. Some women who say they just snap and she's torn the whole house up. I
Yeah.
have relatives, brothers, I have friends who have had to either hold the woman's hands and move her away or get out of the house. Letter A, he doesn't want to be accused of hitting her because as soon as
Mhm.
she dials or somebody dials 911, more than likely he's going on a trip.
Mhm.
And B, he didn't want to get killed, stabbed to
Yeah.
death, or hurt, or shot, or something. So there are a lot
Right.
of people who are going through this as well. As time grows on, we see that violence is just taking away from just being a man thing to just being people. Although
Right.
men do commit more of the physical violence against their spouses, it is still going on. With that said, this is
Mhm.
an excellent book to get for anybody. Leave it on their desk, leave it on their porch, pass it to them and say, hey, I just heard about this lady. She wrote this book. Why don't you read this and tell me what you think about it? Because
Right.
it's those subtle ways that you never know whose life you could be saving, right?
Right.
So I'm going
Right.
to let her read the passage that she feels comfortable with. I want to let you all know that you can purchase this book just like I did on Amazon.com. You can go there and purchase it, buy two or three. They're very inexpensive, and you can bless somebody and save somebody's life in the meantime. Okay.
Okay. Actually, I'm trying to find something really quick. That would be good. Let me. I'm so sorry. I didn't wasn't prepared with a part that I could read, and I'm
I'm
sitting here in the
sorry, you can
dark.
read anything you want to read. I don't care what you think about it. I don't
Okay.
care how you think it may be too strong. These are all adults.
Right. Right.
Because I got the
Um.
copy in my cell phone.
Oh, do
I
you? Do
downloaded
you?
my copy in my cell phone. I sure did. So don't let me pick
Let me,
which part I like.
yeah. Yeah. Go. Would you go ahead? Can you
Yes,
share
let me
something that
go
you?
ahead and
Okay.
pull it up. Folks, I'm going to tell
Yes,
you
ma'am.
something right now. This part that really gets me is the part about your daughter, as far as
Oh.
not even with the book in hand, but just the
Mhm.
fact that your baby had the presence of mind to continue dialing to get you some help.
Yes.
And to me, that speaks volumes. I do want to segue, and maybe we'll talk about the book and the passage in a second. While you're doing something else, I'll look up the passage I like. What I want you to tell me is how does this affect your son? Because he saw this, right?
He's what now? I'm sorry.
Your son saw this
Oh,
go on.
he didn't actually see me being stabbed because he was still upstairs. My daughter actually walked in while he was still stabbing me. But he did see the after part of it where the ambulance was working on me and trying to, to get me to breathe and had to see me get on the helicopter, be airlifted because I was really in a traumatic state at that point where my life was like I could have definitely died. So he did witness all of that. And I have to say that a lot of times women will stay in a relationship and it's one thing for you to stay and it's affecting you. But women, I don't think realize how much this affects your children because I'm telling you right now, today, all these years later, me and my daughter still struggle in our relationship to get along, to there's a respect that's not really there any longer because hey, she watched me be disrespected over and over and over again. So she has her own sets of traumas, suffers from PTSD, anxiety, all these different things that stems from me making bad decisions and allowing this person to stay in my home. My son, on the other hand, is very passive. He has not had any successful relationships in some time because he definitely doesn't want to put his hands on a woman because he saw his mother being abused. He doesn't want to speak up for, so he kind of um, became very, very passive. And although he has a son and he was in a relationship for a while, and then he picked a woman that was abusive to him, that became very physically abusive to him. So being in these relationships and staying too long, your children see these things and it does affect them. They either become abusive or they pick abusive people, because begins to seem like, oh, this is the norm. So yeah, my children have definitely been affected by it, and still even today you can see the results of the trauma that they saw.
Well, I have the part that touched me. It's the very
Hmm.
beginning. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to read this a little bit to you guys so that you guys can hear this. Uh, Let me see here. I want to do this. So here we go, you guys. Listen to this. I was a teen mother, and by the time I was 20 years old, I had two children and had my tubes tied. Married at the age of 18, I already had a toddler, and I was just doing all I could just to not further embarrass my family. I want to
Mm,
stop there.
yeah,
Oftentimes, it's what will somebody say?
yeah.
Oftentimes, it's I can't let anybody know because if I let somebody know, then I'm going to be deemed a failure. They may have said it was too early for me to get married or too young to get married, right? And then
Right.
oftentimes feel like I can't say anything. Derek C.
Hmm.
Williams in the chat says that my mother endured domestic abuse for better part of 1970s. Nowhere to go but to the grave after the first hit. A person best leave immediately. Oh my,
So true.
Derek,
Mm, mm, that's deep. Yeah.
Derek.
And mm, yeah.
So
And
the
I don't
second
think.
portion says, wow, that's amazing. Oh wow. I came from a good home with two hardworking parents who ensured I had what I needed and then some. We lacked in the communication department because I grew up in an era of children were just to do as they were told. So when I was hurt and confused with my life, everything just stayed huddled up. My marriage did not last because, firstly, we were just far too. He had a very sad upbringing that included abuse and drug addiction. The abuse that he'd been exposed to as a child eventually spilled over to our relationship, and my ability to communicate did not help matters. Even though I had the example of the marriage, I just couldn't do it. Eventually, we ended up in a nasty divorce riddled with accusations, and 30 years later, a paternity test. Pick up there. Won't you
Mm,
tell us what picks up there?
mm. Yeah, and this is a little painful to talk about, but um, as I mentioned, we were very young parents. My kids, thank God, now they do have they're working on their relationship with their dad, and it's getting better. But I don't know if it was out of just being nasty and mean, because we did go through some nasty periods in our life. But shortly after my daughter turned 30 years old, he asked for paternity tests, and that hurt me to my core, because me and my daughter were already struggling to get along and have a decent relationship, and now she had a doubt um, that he was her father, and he insisted on having the test, and they actually ended up taking two tests. So yeah, that hurt, and that also had contributed to me and her not getting along very well. We are definitely in a better place now and working on better communication. She's gone to therapy. I've gone to therapy, and that has definitely helped. But yeah, that paternity test thing, that floored me, because I'm like, really? 30 years later, now you want to know if there's and I really thought my daughter would be hurt by it, but yeah, it was definitely a hurting period. I was angry, but we got through it, and 99.9% he was the father.
That's Jerry Springer style. You are the father. I think it's Jerry Springer that
Exactly.
that. Roddy Povich, I think. Which one of them Povich guys? Whatever. So this obviously predated this relationship. 18 years old predated the whole encounter with this man at the gym.
Yes, we
And
were
so,
actually. Go ahead. I'm
do
sorry.
do you notice any personality traits in those two men at all? I mean, was it a type of man that you chose, other than fine?
Well, they both were definitely handsome men, but
Mhm.
very controlling, and both came from abusive relation. Saw their parents be abusive to one another. My kid's father witnessed abuse when he was growing up, saw a lot of abuse. And then, of course, the one who stabbed me, he also witnessed his mother get abused. And what was such a, they both said this to me: I would never put my hands on you because I saw my mother get abused. And that's
Mm.
exactly what they did because they had no coping skills. All they knew is that this is how they solve their issues. So clearly, this must be how I need to solve mine. So that's why I think it's very important that people realize that, children mimic what they see. They mimic what they see, whether good, bad, or indifferent. So we have to work on making sure we give them something positive to copy, you know.
Do you think that we teach our children how to become abusers by staying too long?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do because they begin to think that's the norm. They feel like this is the way my mother dealt with these issues. So this is just a push. And I'll never forget one time I looked at a friend of mine like she was crazy. She said, "Girl, I'm leaving him. He pushed me." I said, "He pushed you? That's all he did?" And me, as unhealthy as I was, that sounds crazy. All he did was push you. But she was doing exactly the right thing. The minute he put his hands on her, push, poke, whatever, that was the time to leave. And I was
Mm.
too tolerant in the stuff that I did and allowed. So it just progressively got worse.
I as you're talking, it's just bringing back memories because my situation was a very public situation in Carson at Dominguez Hills University. And
Mm.
that is where I was attacked by my then husband years back in 83, 84.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
And the police had to come and had the whole entire campus. I mean, all the dudes that we went to high school with, all the girls we went to school with that went to Banning with me,
Yeah.
it was so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Uh, but I was almost left for dead. But the one thing that I will say that I notice about your story and about my story and about so many other women's stories is that the main thing they do besides control is they do belittle and they isolate you. They don't
Exactly.
want you around anybody else that will speak life into you or tell you, what are you doing?
That
Because
is
they
so.
know that they can't, you
Yeah.
know, keep you to themselves. Now, I will say this one thing that I noticed, but I only noticed it once and I only exercised it once. God help me. But the one
Mhm.
thing I noticed was as soon as I picked up something out of fear and sheer anger at this one point, because I was tired of it, is I picked up something and I started hitting him as best as I could to get him off of me. And I
Mhm.
noticed he stopped, but that was the only time because I stayed like an idiot. But
Yeah.
what I want to ask you is, what about that woman that felt like I did, that I was an idiot? I want you to talk to that woman right now. I want you to tell that woman that feels like I did, like she was just an idiot staying or staying as long as she has. How do
Yes.
you talk her out of that, Adrian?
Whew. I would say to her, don't stay too long because trust me, it gets worse. You must, but then I have to emphasize this. You must have a safety plan because anybody in a domestic violence situation, when your abuser loses control of the situation, that is the worst time for a woman. When a woman is trying to leave the situation, because at that point, he's lost control. Okay, so you have to have something in place when it's time to leave, and you are not an idiot. I can, if you read the book, you will see that I made one bad decision after another. One because I was embarrassed of what people may think, what people may say. Um, that, oh my God, here you have another failed relationship. Something's got to be wrong with you. No, we sometimes just pick the wrong people. And I think it's better that you leave as soon as you have something in place where you can either, you have resources available, whether it's a shelter, and don't be ashamed or afraid to go to a shelter. Shelters are not, very, um, very nice. There's some good shelters in Los Angeles County. There's good shelters all over the place. The National Domestic Violence Hotline will get you in some place in your area, or even take you out of the area. But don't be afraid. You are not an idiot for staying. Some of us, we love hard. We think we can change it. We think we can fix the situation. I know that was my thing. If I just love him a little more, if I cook a little bit better, maybe if I had um, came home and dropped it like it's hot just a little bit more, whatever. I kept thinking that it had to be something I was doing wrong. But this is their issue, whether it's a drug issue or whether they're just abusive and out of control. It's not you, and you need to, especially if there's children involved, get out as soon as you can. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to be that woman again. He said he was sorry. He said he wasn't going to do it again. Just that he loves me so much, and I just make him so upset. How do you
Yeah.
talk to me?
And that is the part about the cycle of abuse. The cycle of abuse, it'll start with that, that rage, and then it leads to that fight, and then here comes that honeymoon phase. And that's where we get pulled back in. That honeymoon phase, they are very manipulative, and they have figured you out. They know how to get back in your good graces. And for me, it was with that intimacy. I liked the way he was romantic with me and intimate with me, and he liked to slow dance and all these things. And I don't care if I had a black eye and a busted lip, that was how he pulled me back in. Well, and all it does is goes around and around, and we go in that vicious cycle all over again. And they'll tell you, I'm not going to do it again. I promise. You only person I have. Or they'll go as far as say, I'm gonna kill myself. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Just don't do it in my car. I got to go to work. So it just, it's their way of being manipulative. That I'm sorry stuff. Don't fall for it. Get in a safe place and get out of the situation, because it does is progressively gets worse, like we talked about. It starts off as a push, a shove, then a busted lip, a black eye, and next thing you find yourself in the hospital getting stitches in your forehead, and it just gets worse. It just gets worse.
Oh, wow. Derek C. Williams says, funniest thing, my grandson's in here trying to steal food. And I said, wow. He said, but no, I see you in there getting the salmon croquettes. He said, Derek Williams says, the funniest thing, I found the letter my mom wrote. And even as a youngster, I could tell that she was trying to make it work. Most likely for me and my brother, because she said so. My daddy wasn't there yet.
Mm,
You know, I think that's what a lot of children of abuse, not just even physical abuse, but the constant arguing, the constant
mm-hmm.
belittling, the constant fighting, right? Um,
Yes.
I think what we as parents experience is a little unfair because we experience as a family. When the
Mm-hmm.
husband and the wife are arguing, the children are present, and a lot of times they shouldn't be. All the time
Right.
they shouldn't be. So, as an
Mm-hmm.
unfair parent, that parent will keep that child in the room or nearby or earshots, and that child is learning. They're learning, especially from a little bitty child of 5 or 6 years old, and even after that, they're still learning. So they're learning their coping mechanisms. They're learning how to deal with one another, right?
Exactly.
I
Yes,
think that
ma'am.
a lot of times that's how our children go through. And my goodness, I would never have imagined that Derek ever went through those kinds of things because he is one of the content creators that are here on YouTube. I admire greatly, but it just goes to the human side of this situation, of this ugly beast. Now,
Yeah.
when you wrote that book, I want
Mhm.
you to tell me how people respond to the book when you read it to them, or when they purchase it and they come back and say, "Oh my God." How does that make you feel? Doesn't it make you feel like you made the right decision, Adrian?
It does. And I have gone to different book clubs that have read it, and they read it together. Like they'll read so many chapters and then they discuss it. And just when they ask me questions about it, it's just, and they've gotten so engaged with it, and they're into it, or either it brings up something for them, and oh my God, this is what happened to me. Yes, I have no regrets in writing the book at all. I know it was a shocker for some of my family members that saw some of the stuff that I hid, but overall, I think it's the best thing I've done. And I think it's something that will definitely help people because it's written in a way where it's so real that a person that is in that situation can relate to it. So yeah, there's no regrets. And what I really love is here lately, I have so many men that are reading the book. I just got some feedback today from a gentleman who read the book, and he was like how you said it's a big book, and he read it in 2 days, and he shared with me how he said, I laughed, I cried, I prayed, because that book takes you through all these different emotions. And I even had one lady one time, she was halfway through the book, she said, oh my God, that poor girl, please tell me she doesn't die at the end. She didn't even realize it was my
Bless her
story.
heart.
So yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to read a passage because this right here is exactly what a lot of those guys do. They are very charming, narcissistic.
Very. Oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here he comes up to you and he says, Assalamu alaikum, Queen. I saw you were putting it down in there. That little black girl in that class, she needs you in there to keep up the energy. I'm in it's nice
Yeah.
work, he says.
Mhm.
So he was not only tall with green eyes, girl, he sounded like somebody I knew back in Carson.
Okay. Right?
He
Yeah.
also had the gift of gab. And do
Oh
you
my
find
God.
that's mostly what they have is that gift for gab?
That is that narcissistic behavior. They have, oh my God, they definitely have that gift of gab. They
And
can
that's probably what
talk
fosters
you
the
right out of some
Stockholm
stuff.
syndrome. That's what
Hmm.
fosters that Stockholm syndrome in the
Yes.
person because he's so Rico Suave. You're thinking
Mm,
he's such a nice guy. He didn't mean it. I'm sure that this nice person I'm looking at right now is going to stay around. And that
right.
beast is in. So
Yeah.
he had the gift of gab. Tell us about it.
He was so charming. I mean, like I told you, he had this thing of where he would grab me by my hand, and he had this remote control that he would turn his music on, and he would slow dance with me, and those were things that, and I like that romantic way about him. And we could have just he just could have cussed me out 10 minutes ago, but that would just get to me. And like the charming things, I've always had body image issues and things like that, and he would tell me, "Oh, you're beautiful, and I love this about you." But then the 2 days later, he tell me I was a fat, ugly, whatever, So yeah, he knew how to get me with his charming words and nice things to say. That was definitely he had a gift of that. And I think that's definitely typical of most abusers. Yeah.
And to uh, talk with you. It's a great opportunity to sit with you, to talk with you. Um, we are really at 53 minutes here, and honestly, I haven't even, again, second time this week, I've had an exceptional interview with somebody, just really trying to have a good girl conversation, and it just goes into
Right.
this beautiful uh, blossom of freedom for somebody, especially those who are listening. Now, you guys have seen the copy of the book all over my YouTube channel. I really want you guys to get this book for somebody because right now is the time when you have people who already have a way of escape by going to work every day in the same house together with the
Mm,
person who is abusing them, you
right.
already know it's going to be on and popping. The children aren't going to school. A lot of them are either going to blended school or they're in that heightens everything. Not
Yes.
having enough money heightens everything. Not knowing where they're going to get their next meal is going to make it even worse. Then you add to that all this domestic violence with it. You have an unbelievably lethal combination for life. So I want to give you the floor to say whatever it is you want to say. We're going to, while you're chatting and sharing that with them, we're going to go ahead and put up the 1-800 number. It's actually a toll-free number, not 1-800, but it is a toll-free number. And I want people to get this number down and keep it in your cell phone. I actually have it in my cell phone, and I actually have the number for suicide in my cell phone. Because
Mhm.
as a woman in ministry, as I am, I walk around, I see somebody. You guys are the same. Put that
Mhm.
number inside of your phone and be able to tuck that number to somebody if they need it in a time of need. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank author A. Michelle,
Thank
Adrian
you.
Greene here with us this evening. What a blessing. I'm going
Thank you.
to give her the floor, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to sneak over on the other side here and give you guys that number. So hold on just a second.
Okay. So in closing, I just want to share the book with you all. This is it. Oh, I got it upside down. I don't know if you're seeing it the right way, but this is my story, and I was very transparent in sharing because I want people to get it. Those that aren't in abusive relationships, those that say all the time, why you just didn't leave. It's so much deeper than that. And to me, really, when you say that to a person that's being abused, it's almost like you're re-victimizing them. It's hard to leave. It's not easy. You don't know. We have to take that judgment out of it and work on getting resources for people and helping them to leave these situations because it is difficult. So if you have an opportunity, definitely get the book. It's available on Amazon. Follow me on all my social media networks, pages. And if you want a signed copy, I'll be more than glad to get one to you. And I want to thank Felicia. Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful. And if you ever need me to come on again, I'm so willing. Thanks again.
And I will be. Because I don't think that this is just one of those conversations that we have when it's time for domestic violence here in the United States. I certainly think that it is something that it is constant. It has to
Mhm.
constantly be reiterated, especially within our community. And that's
Right.
one of the things that we need to drive home is we need more things where we start to rebuild our
Hmm.
homes. Now, where here's the irony, folks. She and I don't know each other. We only know one another through social media. And the irony is, we were both raised in the same community.
Yes. Carson, hey.
Carson, hey, Betty.
Yes.
So, so that's the irony. But do you see how good God is? How He will weave us
Yes.
together. And so it
Yes.
is for such a time as this that we remember that there are people that are out there that need us, and that you being here in this chat today, watching this broadcast today, was not by an accident. Listen, there is somebody who needs you, and
Yes.
that somebody might be your neighbor. Won't you help
Hmm.
them today? Won't you help
Right.
them? Please help
Exactly.
them. You never
Yeah.
know. Okay?
Yeah.
You are an absolute blessing. I
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. And thank you so much for spending this last hour with us. I will be contacting you again soon because I think that once you do that new edit on the book or the spin on the workbook, we're going to
Uh-huh.
want to be
Uh-huh.
able to bundle those together and to
Oh
sell
yeah.
them as a kit so that everybody can get
Hmm.
that in their hands and do
Yeah.
some work on themselves, both men and women.
Yes.
Okay? I appreciate you,
Thank
ma'am. Thank you
you.
so
Thanks
much. And
again.
God
Appreciate
bless you
it.
all in the chat.
Thanks. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.